we are starting this deep dive with a statement that should shake every foundation of our federal government.
And what's that?
The national security crisis exposed by recent events cannot be overstated.
Yeah.
And that came straight from the highest levels of political communication.
Right, and it came after this terrifying series of arrests and violent acts that have really exposed this massive ongoing breakdown in our immigration vetting system.
Exactly. So this deep dive is focused on Operation Allies Welcome, or OEW.
That's the program that resettled, what was it, 97,000 Afghan evacuees after the chaotic withdrawal in 2021.
And our mission today is to look past the headlines. We're going to analyze a stack of sources, but we're really focusing on one.
That detailed internal Department of Homeland Security Inspector General report, the DHS OIG report.
Yes, because it documents these deep, systemic vulnerabilities in how the government screened and, more importantly, tracked this population.
Okay, let's get into the urgency here, because we have two horrifying incidents, and they're directly linked to OEW.
And they happen just one day apart. It really confirms that these aren't just theoretical vulnerabilities. They're manifesting as real domestic security threats right now.
So first, you have Mohammed Dawood Alakoze. He's an Afghan national paroled into the U.S. under OEW.
Right.
On a Tuesday, he was arrested by Texas DPS and the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force.
And why? What was the charge?
He had allegedly posted a video on TikTok, a video indicating he was, actively building a bomb.
Building a bomb.
Yeah.
And targeting where?
Targeting the Fort Worth area. I mean, that is a direct, credible threat to public safety.
And then the very next day, it gets worse.
Much worse. We saw the fatal shooting in Washington, D.C.
Another Afghan national, Rahmanullah Lakhanwal, allegedly shot 2 National Guard members,
tragically resulting in the death of Specialist Sarah Beckstrom.
And Lakhanwal was also evacuated and entered the U.S. through this OEW effort.
He was. Now, we should note, he later got asylum under the previous administration, but the crucial link, remains.
They both entered through this specific mass resettlement channel. And now, years later, they're charged with making terroristic threats and murder.
So this raises a really fundamental question, not just for us, but for you, the listener.
How is it possible that a massive resettlement program, one that promised comprehensive screening, resulted in individuals charged with such extreme violence remaining free inside the country?
What does the evidence say about the vetting system itself?
It says the vetting system is critically broken.
Yeah, I mean, Operation Allies Welcome brought in those, nearly 100,000 evacuees.
And this is the crucial point, about 77,000 of them. That's a staggering 79%.
They weren't given permanent status. They were granted temporary humanitarian parole.
And that's the first thing we really need to nail down. Parole means temporary lawful presence.
It is not permanent residency.
It was supposed to be conditional on continuous screening by intelligence, by law enforcement, by counterterrorism professionals.
That was the promise. But the DHS OIG report, I mean, that's where the reality of how this was actually executed just gets laid bare.
The OIG's core warning is pretty simple, actually.
It is. DHS has a deeply fragmented process for identifying and resolving derogatory information for these OEW parolees.
This fragmentation, this siloed approach where one hand doesn't know what the other's doing.
It creates systemic vulnerabilities that these threats can just, walk right through.
And when we say derogatory information, let's be clear. We are not talking about a missed signature on a form.
No. The sources define this clearly. It's information relating to national security concerns, potential fraud, or, prior criminal convictions, serious misconduct.
And the consequences are real. The sources confirm that between July 2021 and December 2022, only 3 OEW parolees were actually removed.
Only 3. But look at why they were removed. 1 for an abusive sexual contact conviction, 1 for a murder conviction,
and 1 for terrorism-related activity.
So the problem isn't that the threats don't exist. The problem is catching the rest of them within this broken structure.
So let's dig into that structure. The OIG says it's fragmented. It involves 3 main parts of DHS.
Right. You have Customs and Border Protections, CBP. You have U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, which is USCIS.
And Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE.
Think of it like a chain of command, but the links, they just aren't connected.
So CBP handles the initial entry.
USCIS is the benefits provider. They process applications for people who want to stay permanently. And ICE is supposed to be the law enforcement arm.
They're supposed to be deporting people.
Supposed to be, but they all have separate processes, and that is exactly where the system starts to fail.
And that failure really becomes visible at USCIS. They're reviewing something like 145,000 applications from this population as of spring 2023.
And in the middle of all that, the OIG found what it called a massive potential USCIS enforcement action gap.
This gap, it's maybe the most bewildering finding in the whole report.
It really is, because USCIS sees its job as a benefit provider. They hand out immigration benefits.
They don't see themselves as a law enforcement agency.
Exactly. Their job isn't to hunt down criminals. So let me walk you through how this works.
Okay, let's do it.
Let's say a parolee applies for permanent status. During the background check, USCIS finds serious security concerns. A felony, for example.
Okay, so they deny the application.
Right. They deny the benefit. But, and this is the key, if that person's temporary parole hasn't expired yet, USCIS generally will not initiate removal proceedings. They won't proactively terminate that person's parole.
Wait, hold on. So an Afghan national can fail the security check, proving they're a security risk.
A public safety threat, yes.
And USCIS just denies their paperwork and leaves them inside the country, untouched, until their temporary parole happens to run out.
That's the consequence. A USCIS official basically confirmed it. They said determining ineligibility for a benefit.
The paperwork denial
is treated as totally separate from deciding whether to terminate parole and start deportation.
That's unbelievable.
The official even said that deciding what to do with these dangerous people might need to be a department-level decision.
Which means no single agency feels like they have the power or the responsibility to actually act.
That's it. So the administrative process itself ensures that a known, documented threat stays right here inside U.S. borders.
And this then spills over to the law enforcement side. So when USCIS does identify what they call an egregious public safety case,
EPS cases, things like murder, terrorism, really severe stuff.
They refer them to IC enforcement and removal operations, ER. But IC almost always says no.
And here it is. This might be the single most terrifying structural flaw in the whole system.
What's the number?
IC-ERO declined a massive 94% of the OEW population's EPS referrals as of March 2023.
94%.
Out of 125 cases they reviewed, only 2 were accepted for enforcement action.
94%. That's virtually every single serious public safety referral being thrown out by the one agency that's supposed to handle it.
What is going on there? Why is that rate so astronomically high?
It's a complete misalignment of expectations. The agencies are just not on the same page.
At all. USCIS is required to refer a case if a non-citizen is simply under investigation or arrest for one of these serious crimes.
Okay, that makes sense. You get arrested for something serious, you get flagged.
Right. But ICRO's internal guidelines, they often only accept cases where there's a conviction.
Oh, that distinction changes everything.
Everything. So imagine a parolee commits a violent assault, gets arrested, he's a clear threat. USCIS flags him, refers him to ICA.
But because getting a conviction can take, what, 2 or 3 years?
Yeah.
Long after the parole is expired.
ICRO just rejects the case. So the person gets released on bail and remains inside the country, totally off the radar, until maybe they commit the next crime.
The irony here is that it creates total gridlock.
It does. ICE officials complained about it. They said USCIS is sending them referrals that are, and this is a quote, guaranteed to be declined.
It adds what one official called a lot of noise to their workload.
They're wasting time on cases they can't pursue, which takes attention away from the people who have been convicted and are an immediate threat.
And this whole mess was made worse by constantly shifting DHS priorities. The sources point to the changes between the February 2021 and September 2021 guidelines.
Yes. The older systems had what they call bright line rules. So, for example, if a non-citizen had an aggravated felony conviction, enforcement was basically mandatory, a clear line.
But the later guidance moved away from that. It gave ICER more discretion.
Discretion to decide if an individual poses a current threat to public safety.
Which sounds reasonable in theory, right?
Yeah.
Nuance. But what was the actual effect?
The practical effect was inconsistency and stagnation. Instead of mandatory removal for serious crimes, it all became subjective.
So an officer in one city might see a violent history as a threat, but an officer somewhere else with the same facts
might only disagree. They might argue, well, the arrest was 6 months ago, so they're not a current threat. Discretion replaced certainty with inconsistency.
Okay, so we've established security checks are easily dodged after entry, and enforcement referrals are almost always rejected.
Right.
Now we get to what I think is the most alarming failure the OIG found. Just tracking these people.
The 77,000 evacuees on that temporary 2-year parole.
That clock started ticking in 2021. Those paroles started expiring back in 2023.
And here's the finding that should frighten anyone concerned with domestic security.
What is it?
DHS has no process for monitoring parole expiration for these individuals.
No process.
And no single part of DHS, not CBP, not USCIS, and not ICE, has accepted responsibility for this function.
We're talking about tens of thousands of people whose legal status is just evaporated.
Yeah.
And the federal government has no way to find them or even know who they are.
So what did ICE say when they were asked about tracking this unmonitored population?
An ICE official was brutally honest.
They said they have about 6,000 officers to monitor millions of non-citizens in the U.S.
6,000 officers.
So an OEW parolee whose parole has expired would simply not be on ICE's radar, quote, unless they commit a crime.
That confirms it. DHS cannot ensure these parolees remain lawfully present. They just stop tracking them.
We have created a massive unmonitored population in legal limbo right here at home that only pops up again if they're arrested for something new.
And even if they are arrested, getting them out of the country is hopelessly complicated.
It is. Removal is not guaranteed, even with a conviction.
Why not?
Because the U.S. government cannot work directly with the Taliban-led government in Afghanistan.
So all removals depend on the cooperation of another country, a third party.
The United Arab Emirates. The entire system is built on this very precarious international relationship.
So even if ICE catches a convicted murderer, their removal depends on the UAE accepting unofficial documents, expired passports, birth certificates,
whatever they might have, and then allowing a witness departure from Abu Dhabi back to Afghanistan.
That is the choke point.
It's extremely vulnerable if the UAE stops cooperating or even just slows things down.
ICE's ability to remove dangerous Afghan nationals just evaporates.
And to make all of this worse, even for the people who are in the system, the data itself is a mess.
The OIG found shocking levels of data integrity problems, simple errors undermining the whole process.
Yeah, this is the basic digital plumbing of the system, and it's faulty. They found widespread errors in USCIS and ICE records.
Like what?
Missing A numbers. Those are the unique ID numbers. Multiple A numbers assigned to one person.
They're my favorite.
In cases where two completely separate individuals were assigned the exact same A number.
Yeah, it's jaw-dropping incompetence. If you can't even connect a name to a reliable ID number, how can you possibly connect them to their full criminal history?
You can't. Not quickly. And that lack of reliable data, it just slows down every single decision.
So let's bring this all back for you, the listener. We started with 2 dramatic, highly publicized arrests. Terror threats, murder, both linked to OEW.
And the DHS OIG report confirms these aren't just isolated anomalies. They are the inevitable natural result of a completely failed structural design.
The sources really reveal a profound systemic failure. The initial OEW program prioritized speed,
which led to temporary, easily gapped security measures. But then the domestic immigration structure that followed,
the one involving USCIS and IC and all these shifting policies,
was then structurally designed to overlook, to defer, or to just outright refuse enforcement against people who pose a risk.
So the OIG concluded that this siloed approach created these huge gaps in responsibility.
Gaps in terminating parole, gaps in starting removal proceedings, and, most critically, gaps in monitoring parole expiration for tens of thousands of people.
The OIG made 5 recommendations. One of them was demanding clarification on who is responsible for monitoring those expiring paroles.
And DHS agreed. They concurred with the recommendation. They admitted the problem exists. But the OIG did not consider the issue closed. Which means, to this day, that key question, who is watching the clock for tens of thousands of potential security threats, remains unanswered.
Which brings us to the final and most provocative question for you to consider. The OIG confirmed 3 OAW parolees were removed for murder and terrorism.
If the system is actively designed to overlook 94% of egregious public safety referrals,
and actively fails to even monitor when thousands of temporary paroles expire,
how many more individuals with derogatory backgrounds are currently operating in the U.S. entirely off the radar?
Waiting for the system to fail in a way that impacts public safety. Right. That failure is not theoretical, it's happening right now.